Tyres are, of course, critical in every motorsport, and MotoGP is no different. MotoGP has one tyre supplier, this being Michelin, who provides 3 front compounds, hard, medium and soft, and 2 rear compounds, a harder option and a softer option. That is new for 2023. Every weekend, each rider gets a tyre allocation made up of 22 dry tyres and 13 wets. This is split into the front and rear tyres. So for the front, they get 10 tyres in the dry, and in the rear, they get 12 tyres. For the wets, they get 6 front tyres and 7 rear tyres. The rider is allowed to select what compounds they have in their tyre allocation, as long as they have one of every compound. So using the front wheel as an example, they might decide to have 5 soft tyres, 3 medium tyres, and 2 hard tyres for their fronts over the weekend, or they might decide to do the inverse. The same as for the rear, but obviously they only have 2 tyre compound selections, so they might bias it more soft or more hard. They don't have that medium option. And the same is true for the wets. They only have 2 tyre compounds, a softer and a harder option, normally called soft and medium actually, and they can select a range within their tyre allocation and choose what compounds they want within that tyre allocation. So if they wanted 3 softs and 4 mediums for the rear, that's allowed as long as they have one of each. It means that the individual manufacturers and riders can select the tyre choice best suited to them. With all this discussion of compounds, you may be wondering what that means, and it's really quite simple. A harder tyre will tend to last longer and have a wider performance range, so it can operate from a lower temperature to a higher temperature and still provide good grip, but it won't provide as much peak grip as a softer tyre. A soft tyre has a much narrower working range but will provide a lot more grip, but might suffer from overheating on successive laps. So, in qualifying, riders will tend to use a softer compound tyre. Not always, but they will tend to use a softer compound tyre because they're on maximum attack and want the peak grip. But for a race, they might choose a harder compound tyre to make sure that they can make it to the end. However, this all leads to race strategy, because riders might select the hard compound tyre to try and get to the end, or they could select a soft compound tyre to attempt to run away at the front and manage a gap until the end of the race. And this is where you get that exciting racing, as one rider chases down another, or as someone has to try and battle with their less capable, harder compound tyres in the early stages to try and stop someone from running away on their much softer and faster tyres. Obviously, this is oversimplified and ignores factors like weather, bikes and things which can affect tyre wear and the tyre selection by individual riders, as well as track conditions, tarmac and all the rest that all change what tyres certain riders will use and how the strategy plays out, since sometimes soft tyres can easily make it to the end of a race without any real tyre saving needed. But it gives you a basic understanding of compounds and an idea of some of the strategy decisions made by riders. If you're new to MotoGP or coming from Formula 1, you might be watching a race one weekend and hear the word asymmetric. And essentially what this means is that the tyre has multiple compounds across it depending on what the circuit requires. The soft tyre is still the softest tyre in the range and the hard tyre is still the hardest tyre in the range, but the compound across the tyre might be softer on the left side and harder on the right to provide grip for a circuit that is perhaps more biased one way or the other. So for example, Austria, with all of those right-hand turns, needs a harder compound tyre on the right to ensure that the tyres are grippy to the end of the lap, whilst the other side, the left side, needs to be a softer compound that can heat up quicker on corner entry for the couple of left-handed turns on the track. If you're coming from Formula 1 or any other car-based motorsport, you should know that MotoGP doesn't have pit stops in it, or at least not very often. Generally, flag-to-flag races, or races with pit stops, only occur when there's excessive tyre wear or the weather conditions actively change during the race. So for example, if it goes from wet to dry or dry to wet, riders are allowed to come in and not swap tyres. Generally they swap bikes, so they will jump from one to another and ride off. In the case of excessive tyre wear, there was 2013 Phillip Island, which was actually quite an interesting race. There was a mandatory pit stop required because they found that the tyres wouldn't make it to the end of the race. This isn't very common nowadays, so generally you'll only see flag to flag races when the weather conditions are likely to change. Okay, in the next video we will take a look at manufacturers in MotoGP. There are 5 of them and we'll cover them all, but the first little bit will just be a general overview of them. So I'll see you over there.